CHAPTER V. Of the Wide, Wide World. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. By Bridget. The Wide, Wide World, by Susan Warner. Chapter V. A Peep into the Wide World. The next day would not do for the intended shopping, nor the next. The third day was fine, though cool and windy. "Do you think you can venture out to day, Mamma?" said Ellen. "I am afraid not. I do not feel quite equal to it, and the wind is a great deal too high for me besides." "Well," said Ellen, in the tone of one who is making up her mind to do something, "we shall have a fine day by and by, I suppose, if we wait long enough. We had to wait a great deal while for our first shopping day. I wish such another would come round." "But the misfortune is," said her mother, "that we cannot afford to wait. November will soon be here, and your clothes may be suddenly wanted before they are ready, if we do not bestir ourselves. And Miss Rice is coming in a few days. I ought to have the merino ready for her." "What will you do, Mamma?" "I do not know, indeed, Ellen. I am greatly at a loss." "Couldn't Papa get the stuffs for you, Mamma?" "No, he's too busy; and besides, he doesn't know about shopping for me." "Well, what will you do, Mamma? Is there nobody else you could ask to get the things for you? Mrs. Foster would do it, Mamma." "I know she would, and I should ask her without any difficulty; but she is confined to her room with a cold. I see nothing for it but to be patient and let things take their course; though if a favourable opportunity should offer, you would have to go, clothes or no clothes; it would not do to lose the chance of a good escort." And Mrs. Montgomery's face showed that this possibility of Ellen's going unprovided gave her some uneasiness. Ellen observed it. "Never mind me, dearest mother; don't be in the least worried about my clothes. You don't know how little I think of them or care for them. It's no matter at all whether I have them or not." Mrs. Montgomery smiled, and passed her hand fondly over her little daughter's head, but presently resumed her anxious look out of the window. "Mamma!" exclaimed Ellen, suddenly starting up, "a bright thought has just come into my head. I'll do it for you, Mamma." "Do what?" "I'll get the merino and things for you, Mamma. You needn't smile. I will, indeed, if you let me." "My dear Ellen," said her mother, "I don't doubt you would, if goodwill only were wanting; but a great deal of skill and experience is necessary for a shopper, and what would you do without either?" "But see, Mamma," pursued Ellen, eagerly, "I'll tell you how I'll manage, and I know I can manage very well. You tell me exactly what colour of merino you want, and give me a little piece to show me how fine it should be, and tell me what price you wish to give; and then I'll go to the store and ask them to show me different pieces, you know; and if I see any I think you would like, I'll ask them to give me a little bit of it to show you, and then I'll bring it home, and if you like it, you can give me the money, and tell me how many yards you want, and I can go back to the store and get it. Why can't I, Mamma?" "Perhaps you could; but, my dear child, I am afraid you wouldn't like the business." "Yes, I should, indeed, Mamma. I should like it dearly, if I could help you so. Will you let me try, Mamma?" "I don't like, my child, to venture you alone on such an errand, among crowds of people. I should be uneasy about you." "Dear Mamma, what would the crowds of people do to me? I am not a bit afraid. You know, Mamma, I have often taken walks alone; that's nothing new; and what harm should come to me while I am in the store? You needn't be in the least uneasy about me. May I go?" Mrs. Montgomery smiled, but was silent. "May I go, Mamma?" repeated Ellen. "Let me go at least and try what I can do. What do you say, Mamma?" "I don't know what to say, my daughter; but I am in difficulty on either hand. I will let you go and see what you can do. It would be a great relief to me to get this merino by any means." "Then shall I go right away, Mamma?" "As well now as ever. You are not afraid of the wind?" "I should think not," said Ellen; and away she scampered up stairs to get ready. With eager haste she dressed herself, then with great care and particularity took her mother's instructions as to the article wanted, and finally set out, sensible that a great trust was reposed in her, and feeling busy and important accordingly. But at the very bottom of Ellen's heart there was a little secret doubtfulness respecting her undertaking. She hardly knew it was there, but then she couldn't tell what it was that made her fingers so inclined to be tremulous while she was dressing, and that made her heart beat quicker than it ought, or than was pleasant, and one of her cheeks so much hotter than the other. However, she set forth upon her errand with a very brisk step, which she kept up till, on turning a corner, she came in sight of the place she was going to. Without thinking much about it, Ellen had directed her steps to St. Clair and Fleury's. It was one of the largest and best stores in the city, and the one she knew where her mother generally made her purchases; and it did not occur to her that it might not be the best for her purpose on this occasion. But her steps slackened as soon as she came in sight of it, and continued to slacken as she drew nearer; and she went up the broad flight of marble steps in front of the store, very slowly indeed, though they were exceeding low and easy. Pleasure was not certainly the uppermost feeling in her mind now, yet she never thought of turning back. She knew that if she could succeed in the object of her mission, her mother would be relieved from some anxiety. That was enough; she was bent on accomplishing it. Timidly she entered the large hall of entrance. It was full of people, and the buzz of business was heard on all sides. Ellen had for some time past seldom gone a shopping with her mother, and had never been in this store but once or twice before. She had not the remotest idea where or in what apartment of the building the merino counter was situated, and she could see no one to speak to. She stood irresolute in the middle of the floor; everybody seemed to be busily engaged with somebody else; and whenever an opening on one side or another appeared to promise her an opportunity, it was sure to be filled up before she could reach it, and, disappointed and abashed, she would return to her old station in the middle of the floor. Clerks frequently passed her, crossing the store in all directions, but they were always bustling along in a great hurry of business. They did not seem to notice her at all, and were gone before poor Ellen could get her mouth open to speak to them. She knew well enough now, poor child, what it was that made her cheeks burn as they did, and her heart beat as if it would burst its bounds. She felt confused, and almost confounded by the incessant hum of voices, and moving crowd of strange people all around her, while her little figure stood alone and unnoticed in the midst of them, and there seemed no prospect that she would be able to gain the ear or the eye of a single person. Once she determined to accost a man she saw advancing toward her from a distance, and actually made up to him for the purpose; but with a hurried bow, and "I beg your pardon, miss," he brushed past. Ellen almost burst into tears. She longed to turn and run out of the store, but a faint hope remaining, and an unwillingness to give up her undertaking, kept her fast. At length one of the clerks in the desk observed her, and remarked to Mr. St. Clair, who stood by, "There is a little girl, Sir, who seems to be looking for something, or waiting for somebody. She has been standing there a good while." Mr. St. Clair, upon this, advanced to poor Ellen's relief. "What do you wish, miss?" he said. But Ellen had been so long preparing sentences, trying to utter them, and failing in the attempt, that now, when an opportunity to speak and be heard was given her, the power of speech seemed to be gone. "Do you wish anything, miss?" inquired Mr. St. Clair again. "Mother sent me," stammered Ellen. "I wish, if you please, Sir Mamma wished me to look at the merinoes, Sir, if you please." "Is your Mamma in the store?" "No, Sir," said Ellen; "she is ill and cannot come out, and she sent me to look at merinoes for her, if you please, Sir." "Here, Saunders," said Mr. St. Clair, "show this young lady the merinoes." Mr. Saunders made his appearance from among a little group of clerks, with whom he had been indulging in a few jokes by way of relief from the tedium of business. "Come this way," he said to Ellen, and sauntering before her with a rather dissatisfied air, led the way out of the entrance hall into another and much larger apartment. There were plenty of people here too, and just as busy as those they had quitted. Mr. Saunders, having brought Ellen to the merino counter, placed himself behind it, and leaning over it and fixing his eyes carelessly upon her, asked what she wanted to look at. His tone and manner struck Ellen most unpleasantly, and made her again wish herself out of the store. He was a tall, lank young man, with a quantity of fair hair combed down on each side of his face, a slovenly exterior, and the most disagreeable pair of eyes, Ellen thought, she had ever beheld. She could not bear to meet them, and cast down her own. Their look was bold, ill bred, and ill humoured, and Ellen felt, though she couldn't have told why, that she need not expect either kindness or politeness from him. "What do you want to see, little one?" inquired this gentleman, as if he had a business on hand he would like to be rid of. Ellen heartily wished he was rid of it, and she too. "Merinoes, if you please," she answered, without looking up. "Well, what kind of merinoes? Here are all sorts and descriptions of merinoes, and I can't pull them all down, you know, for you to look at. What kind do you want?" "I don't know without looking," said Ellen. "Won't you please to show me some?" He tossed down several pieces upon the counter, and tumbled them about before her. "There," said he, "is that anything like what you want? There's a pink one, and there's a blue one, and there's a green one. Is that the kind?" "This is the kind," said Ellen, "but this isn't the colour I want." "What colour do you want?" "Something dark, if you please." "Well, there, that green's dark; won't that do? See, that would make up very pretty for you." "No," said Ellen, "Mamma don't like green." "Why don't she come and choose her stuffs herself, then? What colour does she like?" "Dark blue, or dark brown, or a nice gray would do," said Ellen, "if it's fine enough." Dark blue, or dark brown, or a nice grey, eh? Well, she's pretty easy to suit. A dark blue I've showed you already. What's the matter with that?" "It isn't dark enough," said Ellen. "Well," said he, discontentedly, pulling down another piece, "how will that do? That's dark enough." It was a fine and beautiful piece, very different from those he had showed her first; even Ellen could see that; and fumbling for her little pattern of merino, she compared it with the piece; they agreed perfectly as to fineness. "What is the price of this?" she asked, with trembling hope that she was going to be rewarded by success for all the trouble of her enterprise. "$2 a yard." Her hopes and countenance fell together. "That's too high," she said, with a sigh. "Then take this other blue come, it's a great deal prettier than that dark one, and not so dear; and I know your mother will like it better." Ellen's cheeks were tingling, and her heart throbbing, but she couldn't bear to give up. "Would you be so good as to show me some grey?" He slowly and ill humouredly complied, and took down an excellent piece of dark grey, which Ellen fell in love with at once. But she was again disappointed; it was 14 shillings. "Well, if you won't take that, take something else," said the man. "You can't have everything at once. If you will have cheap goods, of course, you can't have the same quality that you like. But now, here's this other blue, only 12 shillings, and I'll let you have it for 10 if you'll take it." "No, it's too light and too coarse," said Ellen. "Mamma wouldn't like it." "Let me see," said he, seizing her pattern and pretending to compare it; "it's quite as fine as this, if that's all you want." "Could you," said Ellen, timidly, "give me a little bit of this grey to show Mamma?" "Oh, no!" said he, impatiently tossing over the cloths and throwing Ellen's pattern on the floor; "we can't cut up our goods. If people don't choose to buy of us, they may go somewhere else; and if you cannot decide upon anything, I must go and attend to those that can. I can't wait here all day." "What's the matter, Saunders?" said one of his brother clerks, passing him. "Why, I've been here this half hour showing cloths to a child that doesn't know merino from a sheep's back," said he, laughing. And, some other customers coming up at the moment, he was as good as his word, and left Ellen to attend them. Ellen stood a moment stock still, just where he had left her, struggling with her feelings of mortification. She could not endure to let them be seen. Her face was on fire, her head was dizzy. She could not stir at first, and in spite of her utmost efforts, she could not command back one or two rebel tears that forced their way. She lifted her hand to her face to remove them as quietly as possible. "What is all this about, my little girl?" said a strange voice at her side. Ellen started, and turned her face, with the tears but half wiped away, towards the speaker. It was an old gentleman an odd old gentleman, too, she thought; one she certainly would have been rather shy of if she had seen him under other circumstances; but though his face was odd, it looked kindly upon her, and it was a kind tone of voice in which his question had been put, so he seemed to her like a friend. "What is all this?" repeated the old gentleman. Ellen began to tell what it was, but the pride which had forbidden her to weep before strangers gave way at one touch of sympathy, and she poured out tears much faster than words, as she related her story, so that it was some little time before the old gentleman could get a clear notion of her case. He waited very patiently till she had finished, but then he set himself in good earnest about righting the wrong. "Hillo! you, Sir!" he shouted in a voice that made everybody look round "you merino man! come and show your goods. Why aren't you at your post, Sir?" As Mr. Saunders came up, with an altered countenance, "Here's a young lady you've left standing unattended to, I don't know how long. Are these your manners?" "The young lady did not wish anything, I believe, Sir," returned Mr. Saunders softly. "You know better, you scoundrel!" retorted the old gentleman, who was in a great passion. "I saw the whole matter with my own eyes. You are a disgrace to the store, Sir, and deserve to be sent out of it, which you are like enough to be." "I really thought, Sir," said Mr. Saunders, smoothly, for he knew the old gentleman, and knew very well he was a person that must not be offended "I really thought I was not aware, Sir, that the young lady had any occasion for my services." "Well, show your wares, Sir, and hold your tongue. Now, my dear, what did you want?" "I wanted a little bit of this grey merino, Sir, to show Mamma. I couldn't buy it, you know, Sir, until I found out whether she would like it." "Cut a piece, Sir, without any words," said the gentleman. Mr. Saunders obeyed. "Did you like this best?" pursued the old gentleman. "I like this dark blue very much, Sir, and I thought Mamma would, but it's too high." "How much is it?" inquired he. 14 shillings," replied Mr. Saunders. "He said it was $2," exclaimed Ellen. "I beg pardon," said the crestfallen Mr. Saunders. "The young lady mistook me; I was speaking of another piece when I said $2." "He said this was $2, and the grey was 14 shillings," said Ellen. "Is the grey 14 shillings?" inquired the old gentleman. "I think not, Sir," answered Mr. Saunders. "I believe not, Sir; I think it's only 12. I'll inquire, if you please, Sir." "No, no," said the old gentleman; "I know it was only 12. I know your tricks, Sir. Cut a piece off the blue. Now, my dear, are there any more pieces of which you would like to take patterns to show your mother?" "No, Sir," said the overjoyed Ellen; "I am sure she will like one of these." "Now, shall we go, then?" "If you please, Sir," said Ellen, "I should like to have my bit of merino that I brought from home. Mamma wanted me to bring it back again." "Where is it?" "That gentleman threw it on the floor." "Do you hear, Sir?" said the gentleman; "find it directly." Mr. Saunders found and delivered it, after stooping in search of it till he was very red in the face; and he was left, wishing heartily that he had some safe means of revenge, and obliged to come to the conclusion that none was in his reach, and that he must stomach his indignity in the best manner he could. But Ellen and her protector went forth most joyously together from the store. "Do you live far from here?" asked the old gentleman. "Oh, no, Sir," said Ellen, "not very; it's only at Green's Hotel, in Southing street." "I'll go with you," said he; "and when your mother has decided which merino she will have, we'll come right back and get it. I do not want to trust you again to the mercy of that saucy clerk." "Oh, thank you, Sir," said Ellen; "that is just what I was afraid of. But I shall be giving you a great deal of trouble, Sir," she added in another tone. "No, you won't," said the old gentleman; "I can't be troubled, so you needn't say anything about that." They went gaily along, Ellen's heart about 5 times as light as the one with which she had travelled that very road a little while before. Her old friend was in a very cheerful mood too, for he assured Ellen laughingly, that it was of no manner of use for her to be in a hurry, for he could not possibly set up and skip to Green's Hotel, as she seemed inclined to do. They got there at last. Ellen showed the old gentleman into the parlour, and ran up the stairs in great haste to her mother. But in a few minutes she came down again with a very April face, for smiles were playing in every feature while the tears were yet wet upon her cheeks. "Mamma hopes you'll take the trouble, Sir, to come upstairs," she said, seizing his hand. "She wants to thank you herself, Sir." "It is not necessary," said the old gentleman; "it is not necessary at all." But he followed his little conductor, nevertheless, to the door of her mother's room, into which she ushered him with great satisfaction. Mrs. Montgomery was looking very ill; he saw that at a glance. She rose from her sofa, and extending her hand, thanked him, with glistening eyes, for his kindness to her child. "I don't deserve any thanks, Ma'am," said the old gentleman. "I suppose my little friend has told you what made us acquainted." "She gave me a very short account of it," said Mrs. Montgomery. "She was very disagreeably tried," said the old gentleman. "I presume you do not need to be told, Ma'am, that her behaviour was such as would have become any years. I assure you, Ma'am, if I had had no kindness in my composition to feel for the child, my honour as a gentleman would have made me interfere for the lady." Mrs. Montgomery smiled, but looked through glistening eyes again on Ellen. "I am very glad to hear it," she replied. "I was very far from thinking, when I permitted her to go on this errand, that I was exposing her to anything more serious than the annoyance a timid child would feel at having to transact business with strangers." "I suppose not," said the gentleman; "but it isn't a sort of thing that should be often done. There are all sorts of people in this world, and a little one alone in a crowd is in great danger of being trampled upon." Mrs. Montgomery's heart answered this with an involuntary pang. He saw the shade that passed over her face, as she said sadly "I know it, Sir, and it was with strong unwillingness that I allowed Ellen this morning to do as she had proposed; but in truth I was but making a choice between difficulties. I am very sorry I chose as I did. If you are a father, Sir, you know better than I can tell you, how grateful I am for your kind interference." "Say nothing about that, Ma'am; the less the better. I am an old man, and not good for much now, except to please young people. I think myself best off when I have the best chance to do that. So if you will be so good as to choose that merino, and let Miss Ellen and me go and dispatch our business, you will be conferring, and not receiving a favour. And any other errand that you please to intrust her with, I'll undertake to see her safe through." His look and manner obliged Mrs. Montgomery to take him at his word. A very short examination of Ellen's patterns ended in favour of the gray merino; and Ellen was commissioned, not only to get and pay for this, but also to choose a dark dress of the same stuff, and enough of a certain article called nankeen for a coat; Mrs. Montgomery truly opining that the old gentleman's care would do more than see her scatheless; that it would have some regard to the justness and prudence of her purchase. In great glee Ellen set forth again with her new old friend. Her hand was fast in his, and her tongue ran very freely, for her heart was completely open to him. He seemed as pleased to listen as she was to talk, and by little and little Ellen told him all her history the troubles that had come upon her in consequence of her mother's illness, and her intended journey and prospects. That was a happy day to Ellen. They returned to St. Clair in flurries, bought the gray merino and the nankeen, and a dark brown merino for a dress. "Do you want only one of these?" asked the old gentleman. "Mamma said only one," said Ellen; "that will last me all the winter." "Well," said he, "I think two will be better. Let us have another off the same piece, Mr. Shopman." "But I am afraid Mamma won't like it, Sir," said Ellen, gently. "Pooh, pooh!" said he, "your mother has nothing to do with this. This is my affair." He paid for it accordingly. "Now, Miss Ellen," said he, when they left the store, "have you got anything in the shape of a good warm winter bonnet? For it's precious cold up there in Thirlwall. Your pasteboard things won't do; if you don't take good care of your ears, you will lose them some fine frosty day. You must quilt and pad, and all sorts of things, to keep alive and comfortable. So you haven't a hood, eh? Do you think you and I could make out to choose one that your mother would think wasn't quite a fright? Come this way, and let us see. If she don't like it, she can give it away, you know." He led the delighted Ellen into a milliner's shop, and after turning over a great many different articles, chose her a nice warm hood, or quilted bonnet. It was of dark blue silk, well made and pretty. He saw with great satisfaction that it fitted Ellen well, and would protect her ears nicely; and having paid for it and ordered it home, he and Ellen sallied forth into the street again. But he wouldn't let her thank him. "It is just the very thing I wanted, Sir," said Ellen. "Mamma was speaking about it the other day, and she did not see how I was ever to get one, because she did not feel at all able to go out, and I could not get one myself. I know she'll like it very much." "Would you rather have something for yourself or your mother, Ellen, if you could choose, and have but one?" "Oh, for Mamma, Sir," said Ellen, "a great deal." "Come in here," said he; "let us see if we could find anything she would like." It was a grocery store. After looking about a little, the old gentleman ordered sundry pounds of figs and white grapes to be packed up in papers; and being now very near home, he took one parcel and Ellen the other, till they came to the door of Green's Hotel, where he committed both to her care. "Won't you come in, Sir?" said Ellen. "No," said he, "I can't this time. I must go home to dinner." "And shan't I see you any more, Sir?" said Ellen, a shade coming over her face, which a minute before had been quite joyous. "Well, I don't know," said he, kindly. "I hope you will. You shall hear from me again at any rate, I promise you. We've spent one pleasant morning together, haven't we? Good bye, good bye." Ellen's hands were full, but the old gentleman took them in both his, packages and all, and shook them after a fashion, and again bidding her good bye, walked away down the street. The next morning Ellen and her mother were sitting quietly together, and Ellen had not finished her accustomed reading, when there came a knock at the door. "My old gentleman!" cried Ellen, as she sprung to open it. No, there was no old gentleman, but a black man with a brace of beautiful woodcocks in his hand. He bowed very civilly, and said he had been ordered to leave the birds with Miss Montgomery. Ellen, in surprise, took them from him, and likewise a note, which he delivered into her hand. Ellen asked from whom the birds came, but with another polite bow the man said the note would inform her, and went away. In great curiosity she carried them and the note to her mother, to whom the latter was directed. It read thus: "Will Mrs. Montgomery permit an old man to please himself in his own way, by showing his regard for her little daughter, and not feel that he is taking a liberty? The birds are for Miss Ellen." "Oh, Mamma!" exclaimed Ellen, jumping with delight, "did you ever see such a dear old gentleman? Now I know what he meant yesterday, when he asked me if I would rather have something for myself or for you. How kind he is! To do just the very thing for me that he knows would give me the most pleasure. Now, Mamma, these birds are mine, you know, and I give them to you. You must pay me a kiss for them, Mamma; they are worth that. Aren't they beauties?" "They are very fine indeed," said Mrs. Montgomery. "This is just the season for woodcock, and these are in beautiful condition. Do you like woodcocks, Mamma?" "Yes, very much." "Oh, how glad I am!" said Ellen. "I'll ask Sam to have them done very nicely for you, and then you will enjoy them so much." The waiter was called and instructed accordingly, and to him the birds were committed, to be delivered to the care of the cook. "Now, Mamma," said Ellen, "I think these birds have made me happy for all day." "Then I hope, daughter, they will make you busy for all day. You have ruffles to hem, and the skirts of your dresses to make. We need not wait for Miss Rice to do that; and when she comes you will have to help her, for I can do little. You can't be too industrious." "Well, Mamma, I am as willing as can be." This was the beginning of a pleasant 2 weeks to Ellen; weeks to which she often looked back afterwards, so quietly and swiftly the days fled away, in busy occupation and sweet intercourse with her mother. The passions which were apt enough to rise in Ellen's mind upon occasions, were, for the present, kept effectually in check. She could not forget that her days with her mother would very soon be at an end, for a long time at least; and this consciousness, always present to her mind, forbade even the wish to do anything that might grieve or disturb her. Love and tenderness had absolute rule for the time, and even had power to overcome the sorrowful thoughts that would often rise; so that in spite of them, peace reigned; and perhaps both mother and daughter enjoyed this interval the more keenly because they knew that sorrow was at hand. All this while there was scarcely a day that the old gentleman's servant did not knock at their door, bearing a present of game. The second time he came with some fine larks; next was a superb grouse; then a woodcock again. Curiosity strove with astonishment and gratitude in Ellen's mind. "Mamma," she said, after she had admired the grouse for 5 minutes, "I cannot rest without finding out who this old gentleman is." "I am sorry for that," replied Mrs. Montgomery, gravely, "for I see no possible way of your doing it." "Why, Mamma, couldn't I ask the man that brings the birds what his name is? He must know it." "Certainly not; it would be very dishonourable." "Would it, Mamma? Why?" "This old gentleman has not chosen to tell you his name. He wrote his note without signing it, and his man has obviously been instructed not to disclose it. Don't you remember, he did not tell it when you asked him, the first time he came? Now this shows the old gentleman wishes to keep it a secret, and to try to find it out in any way would be a very unworthy return for his kindness. Yes, it wouldn't be doing as I would be done by, to be sure; but would it be dishonourable, Mamma?" "Very. It is very dishonourable to try to find out that about other people which does not concern you, and which they wish to keep from you. Remember that, my dear daughter." "I will, Mamma. I'll never do it, I promise you." "Even in talking with people, if you discern in them any unwillingness to speak upon a subject, avoid it immediately, provided, of course, that some higher interests do not oblige you to go on. That is true politeness, and true kindness, which are nearly the same; and not to do so, I assure you, Ellen, proves one wanting in true honour." "Well, Mamma, I don't care what his name is at least I won't try to find out; but it does worry me that I cannot thank him. I wish he knew how much I feel obliged to him." "Very well, write him and tell him so." "Mamma!" said Ellen, opening her eyes very wide, "can I? Would you?" "Certainly, if you like; it would be very proper." "Then I will. I declare that is a good notion. I'll do it the first thing, and then I can give it to that man if he comes to morrow, as I suppose he will. Mamma," said she, on opening her desk, "how funny! Don't you remember you wondered who I was going to write notes to? Here is one now, Mamma. It is very lucky I have got note paper." More than one sheet of it was ruined before Ellen had satisfied herself with what she wrote. It was a full hour from the time she began, when she brought the following note for her mother's inspection: "Ellen Montgomery does not know how to thank the old gentleman who is so kind to her. Mamma enjoys the birds very much, and I think I do more, for I have the double pleasure of giving them to Mamma, and of eating them afterwards. But your kindness is the best of all. I can't tell you how much I am obliged to you, Sir, but I will always love you for all you have done for me. Ellen Montgomery." This note Mrs. Montgomery approved, and Ellen having, with great care and satisfaction, enclosed it in an envelope, succeeded in sealing it according to rule, and very well. Mrs. Montgomery laughed when she saw the direction, but let it go. Without consulting her, Ellen had written on the outside, "To the old gentleman." She sent it the next morning by the hands of the same servant, who this time was the bearer of a plump partridge, to Miss Montgomery, and her mind was a great deal easier on the subject from that time. CHAPTER VI.